Today, we're going to dig into a really interesting problem in freight brokerage. How do you possibly manage your risk when you sell your services at a fixed price, but you have to buy them in a market where the costs are changing literally every single day?
So, let's put you in the driver's seat. Imagine you're a broker. You've just shaken hands with a shipper, you've locked in your price for the whole year. Great, right? Well, the catch is, you still have to go out and find a truck for every single load on the spot market. And you know how volatile that can be. So, what happens when that market suddenly goes through the roof? That's the challenge we're unpacking today.
At the end of the day, this whole thing is a gamble. That's really the best way to describe it. You're selling freight capacity at a price that's fixed and predictable, but you're buying that same capacity at a price that is completely unpredictable. And that creates this constant tension, this battle against the unknown.
To really get a grip on this gamble, we have to look at the market itself, the one thing no broker can ever control. The risk it throws at you really boils down to two distinct, very powerful forces that you're up against, day in and day out. First up, you've got variation, or dispersion. This means that for the exact same lane on the exact same day, you'll see a huge range of prices. It's wild. And then second, you have change over time. This is your classic inflation or deflation, where the entire market average just starts creeping up or maybe falling month after month. The key thing to remember? Both of these are totally out of your hands.
And this chart illustrates that first point perfectly. Back in the crazy market of 2021, about half of all the shipments on any given lane could swing plus or minus 20% from the median price. That is a massive spread. Now, in a calmer 2024, it's more like plus or minus 10%. So here's the takeaway. This price variation isn't a mistake or a bug in the system. It is the system.
Okay, now for that second risk, change over time. You know, during the chaos of the COVID era, it wasn't weird at all to see the entire market inflate by more than 5% in a single month. Just try to imagine your costs jumping up 5% month after month while your revenue is stuck, totally flat. That's the kind of insane pressure brokers were dealing with. So, if you can't control the market, what can you control? Well, this brings us to the broker's one and really only defense against these unpredictable forces, their margin.
You know, this is where we have to rethink what margin really means. It isn't just about profit. In a market where costs are rising, a broker's margin is actually a strategic buffer. Think of it like a shield, one that you've intentionally built to absorb that initial shock of rising costs. It's what buys you precious, precious time.
And this is where things get really clever. We can actually take this abstract idea of risk and turn it into a real, concrete number you can measure. Think of it like a countdown clock that's ticking away on every single contract you have.
We call this metric the time to a difficult conversation, or TDC for short. It's pretty simple. It's the number of months a contract can survive before rising costs completely eat away your entire margin. It's the countdown to that moment when you either start losing money or you have to pick up the phone and have, well, that difficult conversation with your customer.
And the formula behind it, it's actually so simple, it's beautiful. Your time to a difficult conversation in months is just your gross margin percentage divided by the monthly inflation rate percentage. That's it. But it is such a powerful way to put a number on your risk exposure.
Okay, let's look at this table and see how it works in the real world. Say you've got a healthy 15% margin and the market is inflating at a steady 2% a month. You have 7.5 months before you're in the red. But what if that inflation jumps to 6%? Wow, your runway shrinks to just 2.5 months. All of a sudden, that abstract risk starts to feel very, very real, doesn't it?
All right, so that's the theory. Now let's put this whole TDC model to the test with a couple of real-world scenarios using actual market data. So in our first scenario, we've got a pretty slow and steady inflation of 1.5% per month. Now just look at the massive difference your skill at buying trucks makes. If you're consistently buying 10% above the market median, your TDC is only 4 months. But if you can manage to buy 10% below the median, that contract survives for 19 months.
In fact, if you look at the total potential profit you can squeeze out of that contract, it's 25 times greater just based on that swing in your buying ability. It just goes to show you, in this game, your purchasing power isn't just a small edge, it's everything.
Okay, now let's turn up the heat. In a high inflation scenario, say 3% a month, that countdown clock speeds up like crazy. If you're not great at buying, you've got just 1 month before you're completely underwater. Even a great buyer only gets 9 months. The market pressure just squeezes everybody. So, what happens when that TDC clock finally hits zero?
Well, let's be honest, all the choices are painful. You can try to scramble and find cheaper trucks. You can just eat the losses to protect a long-term relationship. You can make that tough call and ask for more money, or you can just walk away and risk your reputation. None of them are good options.
So, after all that, what's the big lesson here? Well, the key takeaway from this whole TDC model is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It all boils down to this. In an inflationary market, your margin is your hedge. It is literally buying you time. In a flat market, there's not much risk. And in a deflationary market, where your costs are actually falling, your margins are going to grow over time. So this whole concept of TDC, it really only matters when the market is moving against you.
And all of this leaves us with one final, kind of provocative thought. If a broker can't control the market, and a shipper's not going to pay more today just because prices might be higher tomorrow, then what's a rate forecast really for? If your margin is the only real shield you have against a future you can't predict, then maybe the goal isn't to guess the future, but to build a defense strong enough to withstand it, no matter what happens.